And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. Today is a big day indeed for the John Dramani Mahama administration. It is the administration's first budget day, and they put out their economic policy. And this is on the back of last year's campaign for elections. They won it, but they won it with a blueprint, their manifesto. And they told us a few things that they wanted to do if they win. Based on that social contract, you voted for them. This is a first opportunity to see if they really have what it takes to implement all the promises that they make to us. And so the finance minister, Dr. Ato Forson, went to Parliament today and put before the House and our representatives the economic policy. And we're beginning to learn a few things. One thing that jumps out is that the government is desperate, in a hurry, to fulfill those key promises. And a lot of the big ticket items, they have found a way to fund it. And they are not only funding it, but they're also cutting nuisance taxes. And that many are beginning to ask the question, how is a government able to cut taxes, but also spend to make your life better and put more money in your pocket, but at the same time, plug the gaps that will emerge when they cut the taxes? Somehow, Dr. Ato Forson put before Parliament today a master plan that cuts taxes, puts more social programs at play that benefits you, but also somehow he showed us, illustrated it, by cutting elsewhere, readjusting funds that I didn't even know existed, doing a study, in one case over 8 years, looking at how much we're spending from that account and using part of that to fix part of the holes that will be left. If you check Twitter, there's a conversation happening there, and I saw it tonight. My colleagues drew my attention to it. And people are now calling this atonomics. Whatever that is, we'll get to find out tonight. The man himself is here with me. He is the finance minister, Dr. Ato Forson. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful that you could join me.
Thanks for having me.
And what you didn't know is that the man, before he became finance minister, was an expert, a think tank person. So don't be surprised that we are standing in front of a touch screen. Because what you heard in Parliament is great, but it's good to see it. It's good to see it. And then he can talk us through what he has done. And that's why we're going to do this. And I'm grateful that you accepted to do that.
Thank you.
So two segments tonight. We'll do breaking down the specifics, and then we'll sit down for a conversation where I can ask him a few more questions on your behalf, so we can get a bit more granular detail. Questions like, when can we see these beginning to reflect in your pocket? If they've taken away the taxes, when do you expect that when you send money to your mother, you're no longer going to pay that e-levy on it? That will be extra money, either in your mom's pocket or in your pocket. I want to get that detail for you. So stay with me for that second half of the show. We have 1 hour, 30 minutes for this, and so we can get a bit more time with the finance minister. And I want to go straight to it. And you start today by giving us a sense of how you came by this document, the content.
Exactly.
And you give us 3 different sources of ideas for you, if you want to walk us through that.
So first, we engaged the National Economic Dialogue, and it was, let me say, masterclass. We were privileged to have a chairman who is an industrial person, very experienced person, and he took us through a very important dialogue. The participation was apolitical. It was very nationalistic in nature, and the outcome was quite encouraging. To my surprise, the very concerns that I had were the very concerns that the vast majority of the breakout sessions came out with. So there was some convergence. Largely it has to do with fiscal discipline, the way and manner we have destroyed ourselves as a country. So I took that into consideration in preparing the budget. Aside that, I engaged traders in major trading centers.
And this was unprecedented, because I'm yet to see, since I became politically aware, a finance minister who then decides to go to the market. And he didn't just go to the market. A very upskilled man could have gone to Accra Mall, for example. But he went to Mokala of all places.
But you know what, Evans? The best economists in this country are largely market women.
Okay.
They've tested it, they've tried it, they are successful, the best economists that you can ever see.
What was the thinking behind it? And so that's what you're watching there. On your screen, that's the finance minister interacting with a market woman in a shop. and this is Mokola, for those of you who haven't seen it. I'm just curious to know what informed the strategy, going to the market and talking to people?
Largely, there was a series of conversation around government. And that conversation had to do with, are we addressing the needs of the people? And His Excellency the President said, engage further. So the first thing that came to mind was, if I'm going to engage, I have to engage practitioners. Not for only think tanks and high-level people, but I need to go down. And I decided to visit the Mokola market. To my surprise, something came out very strong. Almost every single person that I met, and most of them are women, they said, look, the problem of Ghana today has to do with exchange rate. And if you can stabilize the cedi for us, we'll also be able to hold prices. And I saw a situation that really touched me. A lady that I met in a shop, as soon as she saw me, she started smiling. And I said, how are you? She said, yes, I'm fine. And she went on, so I asked her, where is she coming from? She said, I'm coming from Tufupraso. And to my amazement, the lady said, I was in this shop 3 weeks ago. It's a warehouse. And I buy cooking utensils and resell in my hometown. And today I came back last week. I bought it for about 1,350. I think she said 1,350. And that 1,350, within 3 weeks, the price has changed from 1,350 to approximately 1,750.
I saw that.
So I was really shocked.
You actually exclaimed.
I said, wow, you don't mean it. Within 3 weeks. So I put her in back to the shop, and I asked the shop owner, what exactly is going on here? The shop owner said to me that because of the volatilities we see in the exchange rate, they also have to hedge. And in hedging, they increase their price forward, looking at probably what may happen in the next couple of days. So I assured him that based on the structures we are putting in place, prices of goods and services is not going to go up on the back of the exchange rate that much. I said, okay, if you can signal to us that that's what is going to happen, we also hold our prices. So for me, it was an eye-opener. And in fact, if I get opportunity, I'll go back to the market. And the kind of information I had in the market is economics made simple. It's more than economics. And
we'll see how that then translates into some of the policies that you put out there. Because I hear you emphasizing the point about the people and how there's a very clear distinction in what you're doing. What I see in the budget today, one tax item that you introduce is on the big players in the mining sector.
Exactly.
When it comes to the ordinary people, everything else is about scrapping taxes. Even the VAT reforms I saw today, you were actually thinking about households.
The focus is on households.
Households. I saw households.
VAT is a consumption tax.
Yeah.
And the incident falls on you, the consumer. Businesses will get input VAT and they will be able to offset. But as for household, the incidence is directly on you. And that is the main reason why we're of the view that where VAT is today, we need to reform it and reform it in such a way to give relief to the ordinary Ghanaian, the household. And we say this because if you look at Africa today, Ghana is the only country with effective VAT rate of about 21.9%.
So effectively,
most countries about effective 22%. Most countries have, I think the second highest is Morocco with about 20%. So clearly, there was a problem with the VAT. Not only that, the VAT rate itself has been distorted. You can see some cascading element. You can see the distortion where sales tax has been mixed with value-added tax, where there are some flat rate, there's a standard rate, and many other distortions. So we think this year we should spend some good time to engage properly and review the value-added tax.
We'll come interrogate those a bit. And there's another one is to the youth, and we saw that on X, where you engaged the young people. More than 60,000 people at some point watched you, and this was all before the budget, and all that fed into that. I've seen a few initiatives in there trying to address that bracket of people.
And the kind of knowledge and the participation that came from the youth was amazing. I heard something to my amazement, that a group of pharmacists, over 300 of them, were employed in June 2023. And from June 2023 to date, they've not been paid. I was surprised. I was very active, in the economy since many years ago. But I've never heard this. So when I heard it, I was really surprised at what is going on here. And so I commit to resolve.
Okay. So that's where you get it from in terms of the specifics. But then we look at the fiscal discipline. And I noticed that at the economic dialogue, Dr. Ismail Yamson kept emphasizing that point about
the crust of the matter.
Discipline. You put out a few things today, and we see it on your screens here where you say you want to enforce sanctions on the PFM Act. Sanctions could mean that you're going to be sanctioning some of your own colleagues.
But Evans,
in cabinet, you have the balls to do that?
Evans, first of all, let's call a spade a spade. The Public Financial Management Act has not been implemented as it should be. The Act is a gold star. In fact, it is one of the best you can get in the world. I don't think you can count first 20 countries with very strong, robust PFM regime better than that of Ghana. But the truth remains that Ghana has unable to implement the PFM Act. The previous administration virtually did not implement the PFM Act. We do not need new laws. All what we need to do is to implement the PFM Act. And to implement it successfully, you need to apply the sanctions. And the sanctions may not only be looking forward, it has to look at those who have infringed upon the PFM Act.
In the past?
In the past. So you have to look back and look forward so that, at the minimum, those in office today will also know that what has happened to the person who infringed upon the PFM Act may happen to you.
To be clear.
So the country will not go there.
This will apply to officers in the previous administration.
Of course, it's a PFM Act, and if the infractions were so severe to the extent that it has affected the economy of Ghana, and people are paying a huge price of it, then of course, the Attorney General must act on that. So
this is something that you are going to be looking into, or you have the Attorney General set up a team to probe and find out who has been violating this?
So first of all, we've begun a process to validate some claims at the Ministry of Finance. We inherited huge arrears and huge commitment. Arrears in excess of 67 billion Ghana cedis. 67 billion.
And I want to go there because we're talking about the state of the economy as you met it now, and this is what you presented
67 billion Ghana cedis.
So are you talking about?
Yes, that's it.
That's it.
So we inherited this 67.5 billion Ghana cedis, representing 5.2% of GDP. But it will surprise you to note that this 67.5 billion Ghana cedis, over 80% of this amount, the contract was awarded without commencement certificate.
So this is government contractors and suppliers.
Government contractors and suppliers. You see, and of this 67.5 billion cedis, we have 18 billion cedis plus sitting at the Controller and Accountant General, being payment that has been processed and waiting for payment, because the Minister of Finance then had signed and is sitting at the Controller and Accountant.
Why though? Why is it sitting there if it's...
Well, it's sitting at the Controller and Accountant General because there's no cash to pay. There's no cash to pay.
So whoever was signing...
today, so they just signed it, but there was no cash available.
They didn't know at the time they were signing that there was no cash?
Well, I will not be able to make that statement. But the truth is, they knew that they had exceeded their ceilings for the year, but they still process. And 18.2 billion Ghana cedis is sitting at the Controller and Accountant General today, as I speak with you. Then we have another 49.2 billion Ghana cedis, also sitting at various MDAs, being work done, waiting for payment to the Controller and Accountant General, and obviously to Bank of Ghana for payment. So the two put together will give you 67.5 billion Ghana cedis, being outstanding claims that the government of Ghana had to pay. The first question is, do we have the money to pay that now?
I guess it's a question that the finance minister is the only person who can answer. Do we have the money?
Well, I don't think we have enough 67.5 billion to pay now, because these contracts were awarded without budget, two without allotment, and we do not have the space to accommodate them. We should provision for them. But before you make provision and before you start paying, the first thing you need to do is to validate it. In the budget, I've made provision for some 13 billion cedis to start paying down.
While you validate?
Even before I pay, I need to ensure that this amount is legitimate. And to assess the legitimacy of the amount, we will need to bring on board the Auditor General. So I've reached out to the Auditor General. I've asked him to commission an audit and validate the amount and advise before we can start paying.
And ultimately, you say that the Attorney General may have to get involved in prosecuting
people. We need to, it is his decision to make that. I mean, it's.
But you pull the evidence before him if you find it.
The question is, we have to first of all identify the infractions. If we identify the infractions, we have to submit that to the Attorney General for advice. It is for the Attorney General to make that advice.
Let's break this down a bit more because, and again, this is talking about what you meant. These are huge numbers when it comes to some of the agencies.
It's not only the arrears. The problem we have is more than the arrears.
Okay.
We have, again, contracts that has been awarded and active. About 194 billion Ghana cedis. Contracts. 194 billion Ghana cedis. Contract that has been awarded across the economy. That the Ministry of Finance, one way or the other, if they are to perform, will have to pay. But you see, the contract is what flows into the IPCs. Because when the person works, then the state will have to make allocation to pay. But if you don't have money, why do you award those contracts? 194 billion, almost $200 billion as cedis. 200 billion cedis. And that is different from the 67.5 billion Ghana cedis.
So you're not sure yet if those contracts have been executed or have been executed?
Yes, from the first job that we did, the feedback we had is that some of them are at site working, and some have also, some of them are suppliers, so they have to supply and they are in the process to supply. And so I've said that I want to validate once again and to find out whether they have the authorization to commit government to that extent. And if they don't have authorization, we'll ask them to stop.
In the meantime, are you asking them to pause whilst you look?
Yes, we have already communicated that.
They should pause whilst you look?
Because we need to find out as to whether they have authorization to commit that quantum, 194 billion Ghana cedis, and as to whether the budget can accommodate 194 billion. For example, if they are able to produce IPCs worth 100 billion cedis, can the budget accommodate it? The answer is certainly no, not accommodate it.
And then you talk about, now you're giving us the numbers when it comes to ECG and others.
Yes.
Now we know from what you've said today in Parliament that ECG...
68 billion cedis being amount that they owe. They've awarded so much contract also. Some of the items, according to the minister responsible for energy and green transition, he has informed us that ECG has awarded contracts and they have actually got people to supply them things they would not need for the next 10 years. And some of the things that they would not need for the next 10 years, the expiry date will be the next 5 years. And the question is, can we continue like that as a country?
68 billion
68 billion cedis. But that is not all. They owe IPPs another 1.73 billion US dollars.
Because obviously ECG collects.
Yes, they collect, and they have to pay the IPPs. And if you collect and you use the money to award contract and spend the money ahead of your original obligation, then the question is, they are transferring this IPP's obligation to the state.
And you said today you're negotiating this.
Yes, we have to.
The previous government started something.
Yes, so
they made some savings there.
The rendition, I don't think they signed them or got it through Parliament. Parliament did not approve that. What we seek to do at the moment is to complete that process, and we believe we can make some strong savings. But we'll begin the negotiations.
Cocoa board, you mentioned cocoa board.
It's another elephant.
Huge one, 32 billion.
Yes.
Is what they owe.
32 billion Ghana cedis owned by Ghana Cocoa Board. And of this 32 billion, they owe cocoa roads alone about 20 billion Ghana cedis.
And then you're talking about the cocoa road, exactly what you're talking about. That's 5.7 billion.
This one is road fund.
Road fund, the road fund, yes. Road fund. Yes.
Road fund also owe contractors approximately 6 billion Ghana cedis.
And this is the thing that surprised me. BOG is asking for a bailout.
Yes.
53 billion
cedis.
For what? You say to deal with the negative equity?
Yes.
And this is on the back of the report that showed that there's 60 billion hole.
You remember in my previous life as the minority leader, I kept saying that Bank of Ghana had generated so much debt, so much, deficit. As a result, their balance sheet is not healthy, and that they have generated negative equity. Apparently, the previous administration and the Bank of Ghana had signed an MOU for the government of Ghana, or the taxpayer, to recapitalize the central bank with 53 billion Ghana cedis.
Do you have the money?
I've asked the Bank of Ghana to look within and cut expenditure, because the taxpayer cannot afford 53 billion. And I've communicated that to the government.
But they already have an agreement with government.
But they can look within. They can look within. First of all, they have to look within. You know, you've seen their new head office, very big building. They have a choice to sell and lease back if they want to. They have to look within and cut expenditure and reduce. Evans, the taxpayer cannot afford 53 billion Ghana cedis. Giving 53 billion Ghana cedis to the central bank will simply mean that we will have to deny the taxpayer some public good, like roads, like schools, and like hospitals. Is that what we want? Can we afford it at this stage? The question is no. The answer is no. We cannot be able to afford that. And so the central bank must look within. They have hotels like Guest House and others. Why are they in Guest House? Can they sell some of them and use the money to recapitalize? The taxpayer cannot be used as a punching bag. So I've said to them they should look within. Luckily for me, the governor is on board. And I expect the governor to look within and cut expenditure to reflect the needs of the bank.
If they come to you with, their share of the bargain, right, would you meet them halfway? Or you want them to
the central bank
find all 53 billion?
If the central bank is able to come to me with a reasonable offer, we can have a conversation.
Okay.
But it must start from them. And I have also said that they may also have to consider plowing back their profit over the next 10 years to recapitalize it. That can also be done. It depends.
But what is the implication if they don't do this quickly? Can they survive?
It is not a problem. The bank can survive. See, first of all, what they need to do is to, as soon as possible, generate enough cash to be able to run the affairs of the bank, which I believe they are doing that. All over the world, you've seen some central banks that have survived with negative equity. So
yeah.
It's not out of order. They can be.
They can do that. And of course, there are many stalled projects as a result of everything you've talked about. A few of them, you told us, number of projects, 55. 5.63 billion commitment on projects.
All right.
You talk about 2.67 billion less disbursement, and on disbursed, you're talking about 2.95 billion. And this includes pending IPCs with lenders of significant amounts of money.
All right. Evans, you recall that as part of the debt restructuring, the previous government engaged all bilateral creditors and said that we can't pay our debt any longer. And as a result, disbursement stalled. And we have 55 projects dotted across the country. You've seen the one on your way to Tema through the Central University.
The Tema Flower Road?
See the one from Tema also going all the way to Atimpoku. You've seen the Teshinungwa, the one that the Chinese company is doing. If you go to Takrady, you see the Takrady Market Circle. You see the Fionkwanta Hospital. You see if you go to Kumasi, you see the Komfanochi Hospital. You see Kumasi Outer, Kumasi Inner City roads. And you can also remember this famous this market, KJT market. And many others. There are 55 in number. And it's scattered across the country. As we speak, we have undisbursed amount, approximately 3 billion Ghana cedis, US dollars, 3 billion US dollars. And we also have 300,000 US dollars being IPCs that are outstanding. Aside that, because of the demobilization costs and remobilization delayed payment, we anticipate that an average of 1.1 billion US dollars will accrue to the state as a result of demobilization costs and cost overruns. So that is a big situation. But you see, the problem is not even the project. The problem is the fact that if care is not taken, this project may not be completed anytime soon. I think what I've said is even it's an understatement. If you look at the next graph, you will notice that the IMF has access. The IMF has access to, or IMF has placed the limit of $250 million on all disbursement. After the disbursement resumes, when we've signed the MOU, we are now going to initiate the individual bilateral agreement. After that, you can only draw down $250 million. This means that all the projects you see around the country that are stored, you will need 12 good years to be able to complete it. 12 years. But I'm saying that that will not be a better way to manage public funds.
So what are you going to do about it?
So what we're going to do in the coming days, we'll put on the Ghana hat and prioritize this project. We'll pick first 5 or first 8 and ensure that the next 4 years we'll be able to finish it. Otherwise, if we spread ourselves so thin, the next 4 years we have nothing to show. And some of the projects are 0%, some 10%, some 90%. But why don't you concentrate and finish those at 90%, 80%, 70%, and allow or agree to not to continue the ones that are about 10% or 5%. So these are some of the things that we can consider.
And I want to quickly, as we wrap up, before we sit down for a bigger conversation on some of the key issues, some of the big ticket items. And I know many of you are getting home right now and wondering, did they keep their promise to scrap the taxes? Because that directly impacts your pocket. Yes, they did. And a whole host of them, 5 of them. So we have 10% withholding tax on winnings. That's the famous betting tax is gone. You have the electronic tax e-levy.
All right.
Is gone. You have the emissions levy is gone. You have the VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy is gone as well. And then you have 1.5 withholding tax on winnings of unprocessed gold by small-scale miners, also gone. All of this. And the key question we've been asking you since you put this out in the manifesto was, how are you going to make up for the revenue shortfall? You told us something today. Many economists have said, I'm just quoting Professor Bockman, who I spoke to on News 9 on my radio program, says it is unprecedented. And he rarely comments any gap, but he did commend you. How did you manage to plug this gap?
Okay, Evans, I think going into the ministry, I recall that in 2016, on behalf of my former boss, the Honorable Seth, we sent a bill to Parliament called the Revenue Administration Act. And as part of that act, we had proposed to Parliament to impose 6% of all revenue to be set aside for the purposes of tax refund. 6%. And then we left office in 2016. And so 2017 to date, the 6% had accumulated in total about 26 billion cedis. This 26 billion, I asked the GRA and the Ministry of Finance to give me a breakdown of how this taxes and tax refund account has been used. To my surprise, only, and I mean only 43% of the resources that accumulated into that account was used for the purposes that it was supposed to be used for.
And the purpose then was
to refund taxes.
Okay. So if you've paid your tax and it's established to an audit, you will refund.
Exactly. Like, you know, because of the nature and structure of the VAT, for example, there are times that you overpay and then the tax authority will have to make sure that they refund you to encourage you to make also pay your taxes. Evans, 43% was used largely for tax refund. So I said, are you sure? Can you give me an analysis as to whether they have accumulated some arrears and they are not paying? To my surprise, once again, there was no arrears. And so largely less than 50% of the tax refund amount has been used for the purposes of tax refund. Then I came out to ask them a question. Can you tabulate for me, year in, year out, in the last 8 years, how they have applied the 57%? To my surprise, once again, the money was largely misapplied and used for things that were not supposed to be used. You understand? And I said, this practice cannot continue. And so we are going to put a stop. And to put a stop, we said, okay, to start with, we'll take 2% of the 6% and bring it down to 4%. That 2% this year alone is giving me 3.8 billion cedis. And so 3.8 billion cedis, I looked at what are the taxes that we can scrap. E-levy, I will lose 1.9 billion. So I'll take 1.9 billion from the 3.8. Then I said, what about betting tax? From the implementation so far, if I remove it, I will lose 180 million. So the two put together is about 2.1 billion. So 2.1 minus 3.8, I still have 1.7 billion cedis left. And that 1.7 billion cedis, I decided to give it to society, the ordinary Ghanaian. Give it to society, the ordinary Ghanaian. And who are they? Assemblymen were given 100 million cedis. We gave some money, 499.5 million, to buy sanitary pads for schoolgirls. We gave some money back also to capitation grant, increase it by 73%. We gave some money to buy textbooks. We increased school feeding program. And that 1.7 billion is enough to take care of basic social needs of the ordinary Ghanaian. And so that was something simple that we could do. And I think the way and manner that account had been misused, we need to look into it. We definitely have to look into it because this is against the PFM Act and it's against the Enabling Act, the Revenue Administration Act itself. And the way and manner that account has been abused and raped over the last 8 years is very regrettable.
And by the way, I'm going to be interrogating that a bit more because there are a few more questions there that needs to be unpacked. We're going to take a break. When I return, we'll take a seat. Then I get to ask him the hard questions on your behalf. Now you understand what he's done. He's now told us also how they got the money to give out a bit more to some of the key policies they promised to do. 100 million to the women banking, something that it's also something you put money into. Paying assemblymen is something that you promised that you're also going to commit to. But he's now telling us how they found the money. But let's interrogate it a bit more when we sit for a conversation. You want to stay with us. Dr. Ato Forson, the finance minister, is my guest here on PM Express. We're going to be breaking down this a bit more with some of your questions that have come in, a few of my own also. Let's understand this a bit more, but let's get him also to answer some of the key questions you have, including what the former government has been saying now on the back of the budget, that some of the tax handles that they've abolished, they actually never implemented. And so the point is, how can you abolish something that was never implemented? We will deal with that when we return from this break. And thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. My guest is still the Finance Minister, Dr. Ato Forson, on the day he delivered his first budget, the first budget of the John Dramani Maham's administration. And we've gone through some of the highlights with him, asked him a few questions to clarify. He's given us some clarity around the BOG's request for a bailout. And he says 53 billion, I don't have it, but find it internally. And that is one of the key things, I guess, that it will become very topical now that we know that the BOG, I guess for the first time in its history, asking for a bailout. Is that the first time?
It could be. I've not checked it, but I'll check it.
But that's a key one. But there are a few more questions that we need to put to him, and some of you have sent me yours. I'll put to him on your behalf as well. PMS is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks, Ghana's leading tank indeed. Do you know the secret to real water storage? It's simple. If your tank doesn't have the tortoise on it, then it is not the correct tank. That's the right tortoise tank. Syntex tank is the champion of water tanks. It is strong, it is durable, and built to handle Ghanaian weather. Rain or shine, Syntex tanks has your back. So people, go outside, check your tank, and if it doesn't have the tortoise on it, you know you have to call Syntex tanks to get it replaced, or indeed call them on 0244 335 168 or buy or find one of our 400 agents nationwide. And you can also shop online at syntexgh.com. A strong, a tough. And Doc is with me in the studio, and I want to go straight to the big ticket items. And one of the big ticket items, obviously, is the scrapping of the taxes that you promised us when you were campaigning. You scrapped in total now 5 of them. So I'm talking about the 10% withholding tax on winning lottery. That's a betting tax. Electronic transfer e-levy. Then you have the emissions levy. You have the VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy. And then you have the 1.5% withholding tax on winning of unprocessed gold. That's 5 of them. Key question is, when will these take full effect? When will I begin to feel it in my pocket?
Okay, thank you. Tomorrow morning, I'll be going to Parliament to submit the bills. And I expect Parliament to take them under certificate of urgency. If they do, tomorrow, repealing the taxes will be 1 clause each. So, and I'm repealing the betting tax, for example, is very easy. The e-levy, all of those things that you are repealing, quite easy. I believe Parliament will be able to take it through certificate of urgency. And if they do, His Excellency the President will sign them immediately. And immediately we'll have the relief. So
tomorrow you specifically request for it to be treated as under secretary of agency?
Okay. I request it. It is part of the, because it's a revenue bill, and under the Constitution, you have a leeway to lay finance bills under certificate of urgency.
Do you have the backing of your 183 members?
Oh, yes.
Are they still happy?
Oh, yes. You saw it today. And as for the backing of the NDC Majority Caucus, we have it 100% to repeal it.
So it's very likely that by the close of tomorrow, these would have taken effect?
It's very likely that tomorrow I will lay it. And I'm hopeful that Parliament will immediately act. I can't preempt Parliament. I know the rules have been there for years, and I've served as a leader of that house before. So I don't want to preempt what Parliament will do. But I can assure you that I'll do my bit tomorrow. I'll submit it to Parliament. And looking at the urgency involved, I'm hopeful that Parliament will take it through the various stages and approve it for us.
There are 2 items there, though. I've been checking your manifesto. I didn't quite find that as a manifesto promise.
Correct.
And this is the VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy and a 1.5% withholding tax on winning of unprocessed gold by small-scale miners.
Okay.
It wasn't something you promised. So
Yes.
how did they find themselves in the budget?
We did not promise, but we had to do it for 2 reasons. First, we are establishing the Ghana Gold Board with an objective that the Ghana Gold Board will buy the gold coming from small-scale miners. Today, we are seeing the small-scale miners actually smuggling the gold outside Ghana to Togo and Burkina Faso and some to Mali. And this is obviously as a result of the high withholding tax rate on that. And because of the smuggling, Ghana is not benefiting fully as to how we should actually benefit from. And so as part of the strategy to mop the needed forex to support the city, we decided to allow the revenue, that small revenue, to go, and in return, we will be able to mop up the forex from the gold to stabilize the currency. So it was an opportunity cost to allow these $50 million cedis to stay, as against.
How much again were we
making? It's about 50 million.
50 million.
50 million is less than 100 million. Yes, 50 million cedis.
Cedis.
So you allow it to go and psychologically bring in the confidence so that they will not smuggle the gold out, but rather you allow the gold to stay in Ghana and Ghana will be able to benefit from the foreign exchange that we need so much. And my brother, the truth is also that currently the central bank that is buying gold, okay, they don't pay their withholding tax because they are exempted. And so that tax is not really beneficial. And it is rather allowing smuggling. And so we felt there's the need to take it out and allow gold to be able to come into the country, or Ghana's gold to stay, so that we'll be able to sell the gold and bring the forex to support it.
And a VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy?
The previous administration in December, I think December 2023, introduced VAT on insurance. And as part of the bill that they introduced, that became law in January 2024, there is non-life insurance, including vehicles. So I said, the other insurance, such as, you have different types of insurance. You have marine insurance and different types of insurance. They are largely patronized by companies. And most of these companies, they are VAT registered. And they'll be able to offset their input VAT with output VAT. And the incidence will not be on individuals. But if you introduce VAT on motor vehicles, the incidence will be on the trotro driver, on the taxi driver, on the Uber driver. So even if you are going to implement such a policy, the first thing you need to do is to exempt the ordinary person, the person who is running a taxi, the person who is running trotro, the person who, by the grace of God, has been able to buy a vehicle, and that person needs to buy insurance. You don't want to make it punitive so that such a person will not even buy the insurance at all. So I felt, based on the analysis, the incidence on the motor vehicle VAT will be on the ordinary Ghanaian, and it is better you exempt that and allow the policy to go. And that is why I deliberately zoomed in on that one. And also the amount of money involved.
How much was it?
It's about 20-something million. Based on the analysis that they gave to us, you allow that to go. And because even the noise around it, it's more or less a nuisance tax, and it's not worthwhile. So allow that to go, and rather allow the companies to pay, because they will be able to offset their input VAT with their output VAT. And the companies are not complaining, they want to pay anyway.
And I wonder if there was any conversation with the insurers themselves, the insurance commission, and what their thoughts were.
No, the law already exists. They know about it already, and GRA is implemented.
As in your decision to scrap it?
Yes. Oh, our decision to scrap it, you don't really need them to inform them that you are lifting a burden. If I'm lifting a burden off you, I don't need your permission to lift your burden, unless maybe the person wants to enjoy the burden. I'm sure they'll be happy.
The former finance minister today at the press conference shortly after you delivered your statement was categorical that the betting tax is not something they implemented. So how do you say that you are scrapping a tax that, yes, was on the books, but have never been implemented?
I don't think he's on top of that matter, because my checks revealed that it was implemented in the second half of 2024. And my check also revealed that year to date, government of Ghana has collected over 80 million Ghana cedis from betting tax. So I don't know what he's talking about. It is not a fact. The fact on the ground does not support his assertion. And clearly, the betting tax was implemented.
On that same subject, we illustrated on the screen how you plan to block this. I remember on the show last year, the fundamental question we were asking is, you promised to cut a lot of taxes, yet we know that this is going to be tough economically. And you've talked about it. A lot of the debt that were restructured, you're beginning to pay now. So that's a huge hole that you need to plug. And then you're cutting taxes, right? You illustrated that you're going to use the tax refund account, money that had accrued in there that were not used for it, to cover that. I am interested in how you came to discover this option. You've explained that this is something that you initiated with Setekbe.
Yes, Setekbe initiated.
Okay, yeah, of course, the two of you did, but he was your boss then. So you knew this was something that was there And then when you check, you found that only 3% of what had accrued had been used. You're talking about some in excess of some, I believe, it was 29.11 billion, out of which they've just used 43%. And I was in the calculations. You have 16.61 billion that was unaccounted for.
Exactly.
In essence, over 8 years.
Over 8 years.
You actually allege that it has been abused and the funds misapplied, as in the excess that was left in there. That's a serious accusation.
Oh, it's not serious accusation. I think it's gone past accusation. It's the fact. It's the fact. If you look at the Revenue Administration Act, it tells you what you have to use the tax refund account to. I mean, it gives you a clear indication and a clear guidelines and the way you should operate that account. Unfortunately, it has been used as a slush fund. Unfortunately. I don't want to go into the details as to how they use it because
once you say misapplied, then you must know what they used it for.
Oh, no, I know exactly what they used the money for. They were using it to pay for contractors. As and when they feel that a contractor must be paid from that account, and they were paying it from the contract. They were using it to pay contractors. That's what they did.
Is somebody going to be held accountable for this?
It is not up to me to hold people accountable. It's up to the government agency. And the government agency is acting on this matter.
You have drawn the attention of the agency
they know already.
To this?
They know already.
But 16.61 billion is what you're talking about.
It's quite a lot of money that has been misapplied.
So the money, the excess, you didn't find it in the account?
It is not in the account. The account is empty.
The account of 29.11 billion.
It's empty as we speak.
They use only 43%, and the rest vanished.
The rest has...
Which is what you're tracking. You said it was misapplied. Okay. And you said the agencies are aware, and they're looking into this. Let's talk still about one of the key areas of major controversy, the free SHS. And this, again, relates to you trying to find monies to fund it. This year, in excess of, 3.5 billion is what is projected to be spent on the free SHS. Considering everything else you've done, why are you going to get 3.5 billion under this economy today to fund the free SHS that you want to enhance? So it's going to cost you more.
Evans, let me put it this way. There has been a major policy shift from the previous administration to the current administration. The first budget of the MPP in 2017, they decided to introduce the Capping and Realignment Act to cap all statutory funds and re-centralize the expenditure at the Ministry of Finance. So they believe more of centralization instead of decentralization. To the extent that even the District Assembly's Common Fund, that is supposed to be the champion of decentralization, was capped from the beginning. And clearly, even the amount that was supposed to be sent to the district at the District Assembly level, District Assembly Common Fund level, also they decided to hold the center, the amount more at the center instead of sending it to the districts. So they believe more of this re-centralization. What we have done today is to reverse that. We have uncapped 3 major statutory funds and made major policy pronouncement on the 4th one. The first thing we did with the GET fund is to restore the capping, the total amount that is supposed to go to GET fund. By restoring the total amount that is supposed to go to GET fund, an additional amount of 4.1 billion cedis has been made available to the Ghana Education Trust Fund. 4.1 billion cedis. The free senior high school budget for this year is 3.5 billion cedis. So what we have said, and His Excellency has said, is that we want to use that to provide dedicated sources of funding for the free senior high school education. You can call it secondary education. And so he has granted us an approval to amend the Capping and Realignment Act to uncap the Ghana Education Trust Fund and also to amend the Ghana Education Trust Fund and allocate an amount for the sustainable funding of free senior high school. So what we've done simple is that if, for example, they need 3.5 billion and we've given them 4.1, there's still an excess of 600 million Ghana cedis for Get Fund by ensuring that at a minimum they will be able to perform their core mandate, and two, they will be able to fund free senior high school. They still have excess 600 million cedis in excess. And we have said, add PWD education to it.
So that excess then you intend to use
the free tertiary education for PW, persons with disability, it's not that much. It's less than 20 million cedis. And so if you add that, they will still, even if it's 100 million, they will still have at least 500 million cedis extra at Get Fund. What we've also done is that, aside on capping, Get Fund had earlier on, again during the term of the previous administration, had borrowed money and securitized all their revenue flows. And about 55% of their amount was being used to service that debt, the famous Dachi bond. The Ministry of Finance has decided to absorb that debt so it becomes a state debt and claim Get Fund. And so Get Fund, as we speak, we've taken that obligation from Get Fund. And that the existing percentage that should go to them this year, for example, they are going to get about 8 billion cedis plus. That 8 billion cedis, 3.5 will be for what you call the free senior high school.
Directly. Yeah.
And then the rest, they will still be able to build infrastructure, like the completion of the E-block and then the tertiary education infrastructure. They will continue performing their core mandate. So we have made Get Fund strong. At the same time, we have fixed the age-old problem of free education funding.
So what you're saying is, as far as your government is concerned, your dedicated funding source for free
for free secondary education
is going to come directly from the Get Fund.
It's going to come directly from the Get Fund. And this is going to be sustainable and permanent. And that is what we have solved.
The previous government relied on revenues from petroleum.
From oil revenue.
Yes. So what you intend then to do with that source of funding? Because then you have that then available.
So the oil revenue, we've always complained about how oil revenues has been used in the last few years. And if you have a finite resources, you should be able to point to something. Evans, our oil revenues are dwindling. We started producing oil in 2011. To date, it is very difficult to point to something that we use the oil revenue to construct, apart from that Tuambo gas processing plant that Professor Mills and President Mahama constructed. Apart from that Tuambo gas processing plant, there's nothing you can point your hand and say that this was done with oil revenue. If you look at our budget nomenclature in particular, you notice that the oil resources revenue that goes into the budget is spread 30-70. 30 for goods and services, 70 for development. And if you track the goods and services, they use the oil revenue sometimes to run office day-to-day, running of government office, buying books, buying that, buying air tickets and all. Then you have the remaining 70% that has been spread so thin, to the extent that we use some to construct even KVIPs, some for pothole patching, and you can't track it, and that has been the problem that PIAC has always raised. We found a solution. What we've done is that the entire annual budget funding amount that is coming into the budget from the oil resources, we have ring-fenced it, and we are going to use it for dedicated infrastructure to open the country through the big push.
So that's where you're getting the money for your infrastructure projects.
So you have 13.8 billion cedis from oil and mineral royalties. The two put together is what is funding the big push.
Will some of the stalled projects benefit from this pool?
The stalled project has its own sources of financing because they are loans that you contracted and you defaulted, and you are in the process of negotiating the loans. You are in the process of signing, and we've signed an MOU. It is left with individual programs that we have to sign. So this big push is different from those stalled projects. And you have 250 million CDs that you can draw down from. So we'll use that. But this big push will be dedicated to open up the country. In the coming days, we will publish the big push projects. But before we publish, we want to prepare the project and cost them properly. We've only been in office for 5 weeks. I think this is our second month in office. And we want to use the next 2 months to prepare this project properly before we start spending.
Still on the allocations that you did, so that's free SHS. Now, but in spite of the funding allocation, the free SHS has shown that feeding was a big part of the problem. The quality of the feeding was an issue. I know that in the budget you have increased funding allocation for that. Yes, the funding is available, but how are you ensuring that throughout the chain in terms of the free SHS, you have in the past, and under the previous administration, you have the headmasters complaining that we're not getting monies on time, yes. There were significant delays. So it's one thing finding this funding source, making an allocation, and dispersing. How are you fixing that problem?
Even the credibility of any budget matters a lot. You can't prepare a budget and fail to implement it. I can assure you that I commit to implement this budget to the letter. I did not just announce numbers. I've run the models, and I know that when the revenue comes in, we are going to transfer them to those who have to get their transfers through allotment. I will implement this budget strongly, and I ask you to assess me by the end of the year. We'll make sure that by the end of the year, the revenues that will come in will go to those that we have made allocations for. And those that we have not made allocations for, they should not make a mistake and ask for something that they do not deserve, because they are not going to get it.
One allocation you made was to the victims of the Kosomo Dam spillage.
All right.
You've allocated 242.5 million to them.
All right.
But question, you were in Parliament when the previous government and that Ken Ofori-Atta came and said they have also allocated, I believe it's on an excess of 200 million for those same victims. So what happened to that? And this is just pretty much a year ago.
But ask yourself whether they made payment to them. The answer is no, from the brief that I have had. And so the MPs around the enclave came to me, and then the minister responsible for works and housing also made a passionate case, and we felt there was the need for us to make allocation. Cabinet endorsed that allocation, so we've made allocation to deal with the problems.
Okay, so that's going to, where is this coming from though? Where's the source of this?
It's the source coming from the general budget.
Let's talk about something that you've talked about in the past. Cutting expenditure was a big deal for you. How much expenditure have you cut in this budget?
In terms of primary expenditure, which is, let me put it this way, primary expenditure is total expenditure less interest payment. The previous administration in the last year did about 17% of GDP. We have reduced it to about 15% of GDP, so about 2 percentage point cut. And that is quite significant.
But so 10 billion, I believe?
It's more than that. In nominal terms, I think about 20-something billion.
And those cuts are coming from which areas?
So let me give you an example. Goods and services, for example, we send it back to 2023 levels.
2 years?
Yes. 2023 levels for ministries, departments, and agencies to look within and cut.
So everybody?
Everybody.
Including your own ministry?
Including the president.
And the president says it's okay with it?
The president asks us to do that.
Specifically goods and services?
Goods and services, CAPEX. And CAPEX, apart from CAPEX is not much affected because we also ring fence the oil revenue all for CAPEX. So all in all, CAPEX has gone up higher for goods and services. We have reduced it to 2023 levels.
And
we have also identified some programs and scrapped them. We have scrapped the Ghana case. We have scrapped the
One District, One Factory.
One District, One Factory. We have scrapped USTAT, and we have identified development authorities, I think 3 of them, Coastal Development Authority, Middle Belt Development Authority, and Northern Belt Development Authority. We've said that they are duplicating the functions of the district assemblies. And so we've scrapped it and asked that the staff should go to the district or the regional administrations.
The One District, One Factory, though, was a plausible policy. We saw some factories actually emerge on the back of that policy. And I see the growth rate for the industrial sector, and it's inching up. It's on an upward trajectory.
Well,
so why are you scrapping it, though?
We don't see that. The evidence we've seen does not support the argument that were made in the past. That the business growth that we saw was not coming from the 1D, 1F policy. And the evidence to that. And so we felt there's no need for us to continue with that policy.
What about factories that were in the process of getting government backing for it to take off? Those were in a pipeline, if you like.
The back end, some of them were looking for tax exemptions.
Yeah.
Parliament.
And this is something that you fought. I remember I did an interview with you. It started with $400 million, and you fought it until it was reduced.
The evidence we've seen, I mean, last Parliament in particular, we noticed that a huge chunk of that money were being allocated or given to companies that does not actually deserve it. And so that was the basis why the last Parliament fought against it, and it didn't go anywhere. So the policy has been dying, and so we felt that there's an opportunity for us to cut that waste. And so that's always been on the radar.
I mean, so for companies and potential factories that were in the pipeline, what happens to them?
I don't know one. And this policy has been around for 8 years. And we have not seen a situation where this has been very beneficial to the people of Ghana. So we felt there's the need for us to cut it. So it has been cut.
You start, I believe, was 100 billion cedis investment, I believe.
That's what I had too.
Yes. And monies, we're told in the budget was allocated to that. Get entrepreneurs, young people built. That was positive too. So are you replacing with something, or are you scrapping it, and those who were benefiting from it, what happens?
We are going to implement the Edumawura project, where we will identify entrepreneurs, train them, and give them some startups.
It's the same model, is it not?
But it's a bit different. Aside, we are also going to implement the National Entrepreneurship Program, the National Apprenticeship Program. We've allocated 300 million Ghana cedis to ensure that those, particularly in rural Ghana, that want to earn some skills, we'll give them the necessary skill training and equip them with some equipment so that they'll be able to operate and do well in their various localities.
There's a big ticket item that I cannot end without talking about, VAT reform. You formed a task force to do this with a clear mandate, including scrapping aspects of the VAT, and you say in the budget to benefit households, even some businesses, you're exempting them now from paying taxes. Small and medium-scale enterprises will be exempt from paying taxes. Yes, you're going to reform, but in there you're cutting. Why? You need money. You need more money, not less.
Evans, Ghana's VAT requires an urgent reform. Urgent reform. We need those reforms in the sense that the VAT rate and the distortions that we've seen in the last few years has rendered compliance virtually Zero. There are a number of people that are not paying the VAT. Obviously, because the rate has risen to a level that compliance is coming down. Aside, the VAT registration threshold has not been adjusted, even after inflation went to hyper levels at 54% in 2022. And so those who are not supposed to charge VAT previously, today are charging VAT, even on the back of inflation. And there is an urgent need for us to review the VAT registration threshold. Evans, in all honesty, the way VAT works is such that those collecting VAT are only withholding agents, and they withhold on behalf of the government and send to government. And you will need to, at a minimum, have the ability to keep records if you are to charge VAT. And so the person that is selling Amada or someone selling something small shop should ideally be exempted from the charging of VAT. And that is why you have a registration threshold. Today, because of inflation, most of them now have to charge VAT. So what we are saying is that we are going to exempt, increase the registration threshold up to a level that will exempt those that cannot keep records, so that those people do not even charge VAT. Because if the person cannot keep record and you force that person to charge VAT, they will collect VAT and keep. And so, instead of the tax authorities or the government receiving the tax that they are collecting on behalf of government, they collect it for themselves.
But how do you expand the tax net then?
No, you can
letting them off the hook.
It is the structure of VAT all over the world. You introduce a threshold. Go to Europe, go to parts of Africa, everywhere else. It's not a sales tax, it's a VAT. And that you have a structure where you exempt those companies that cannot keep records. But they have another form of tax they pay from their income, those companies, they have tax. VAT is not supposed to be charged by everyone. You have to reach a certain threshold and prove that you can keep an account before you can charge VAT. And so that is part of the structure of VAT. Today, I think the registration, you need about, I think about 500,000 cedis worth of sales per annum before you can charge VAT. Why is it that they don't say everybody else can charge VAT? But there is a threshold that your sales must get up to before you can charge VAT. But that threshold, even if you adjust to inflation, is in excess of 1 million cedis as we speak. So why don't we adjust that to exempt those companies from the collecting of VAT? And so it's part of the parameters that we have set up. And we expect that by NDA, we'll complete. And then
so that's a time frame for the task force. And including your mandate to them is abolishing COVID-19 levy.
All right.
We'll go. Reversing the decoupling of Get Fund and NHIL. And then also you're talking about the reversing the VAT flat rate regime, which Guta has been talking about quite a while. The question then becomes, you found a way to plug that hole from the other tax handles you abolished.
Yes.
When you take off these eventually down the year, have you figured out how you're plugging that?
If we take this out eventually, compliance will increase and there will be enough. In fact, we even get more than what we are supposed to get. Evidence has suggested to us that the reason why compliance is so low is that the VAT has reached a level that no one wants to pay. That we will need to immediately look at it and reform. And after the reform, we expect the VAT will do better than the way we've seen it in
the few questions, quick touch questions that have come in, I want to ask you. One of them, I will start with a good friend of yours, Kojo Nkrumah. And I say that because there was a show that we did together years back, and I saw that you talked about it in your vetting that he was on. He asked a question for you. Asked also whether they are scrapping only the 10% withholding on betting, or they are scrapping the actual income tax of 10%. He says those are two different things.
Okay. Thank you, but ask Kojo, what did our manifesto say? Our manifesto said we would scrap the 10% tax on betting winnings. So we are doing exactly what our manifesto said and what we pledged and the president signed a social contract with the people. Nothing more, nothing less. Exactly what we said is what we are going to do.
Okay. And another one says the concern around the cuts that you're making isn't deep enough. And if you look at the 2024 total appropriation stood at 250 billion. Now in 2025, appropriation is standing at 291 billion. So it's a bit more than what was appropriated last year.
I think that is a mistake if the person look at it from that angle. In the year 2024, we had not resumed the servicing of certain debt. Today we have resumed. And so it is not always appropriations that you use to make that analysis. There's something we call primary expenditure. And that is what we throw out to the primary deficit. So primary deficit, and for a reason why we do, the reason why we do that is that we segregate the debt servicing because it's a given. You have already accumulated X amount of debt and you have to pay. You can't cut that expenditure. It is only, for example, the TB rate that based on the activities, you can reduce it downwards. But the other debt, like the debt restructuring that was done recently, you have already restructured the debt and you have to pay. And you are now beginning to pay, so you have to pay. But the cut that we have the power to cut has to do with primary expenditure. And primary expenditure has come down.
Mm. And then,
so if you can inform the person to look out for primary expenditure, he will understand what primary expenditure is and the cut that we have made.
You give an update today on the 24-hour economic policy
Correct.
coming to Parliament.
Correct.
Do you have a timeline when
Yes.
you expect the specifics to come? Because you need that to make allocations
Correct.
for it. Or you already have an idea how much this is going to cost you?
Okay, so the 24-hour economy is going to be a private sector driven. And it's not going to be a policy where budget will make allocation to. It's going to be a private sector driven economic policy.
But you must incentivize that.
Yes, we will incentivize that. We will incentivize that. But the incentivication or the way we are going to incentivize will not mean we are making budgetary allocation to incentivize them. So that will be done. And as I said, I've only been in office for 5 weeks. All the work we've done so far is only 5 weeks' work that we've done. The immediate thing I need to do is to make sure by 31st of March I have an Appropriations Act to be able to spend beginning first week of April. Aside, we are preparing a number of policies to be presented to Parliament. The first is the 24-hour economic policy. The second is the big push. We are going to send them to Parliament after the Appropriations Act. And also, we have a number of tax bills that I've mentioned to you. Beginning tomorrow, we'll seek that these bills be repealed or this act be repealed. And we need to get through all of that. Then we'll present the economic policies to Parliament.
I mean, just before you're out of curiosity, you've been the finance minister for, what, just over a month?
Correct.
Right? You've done it all in terms of the hierarchy and the climbing of it. Setekwe was your boss. You were there, deputy finance minister. You've been in Parliament for 16 years now?
It's my 17th year.
Yeah, so for a long, long time in Parliament. You came in as an ordinary member of Parliament. You've risen to become deputy chair of the Finance Committee, deputy minority leader, majority leader.
I wasn't deputy.
You were there.
I started as obviously a backbencher, and then deputy minister of finance. Then I became ranking member. Ranking member,
yes. And then obviously you became minority leader. You became majority leader too this year.
Yes.
Before you now rose to the. How does it feel being a finance minister?
I think the experience I've been able to go through over the last few years has prepared me for this job. It has given me the political understanding for me to combine politics with economics, political economy.
I made a point today that you're one of the first pure politician finance ministers we've had in a long time. You have to go all the way back to Banredu and to some extent Osafo Mafo. MPs, yes, who did it. But since then, almost everybody else would come in as pure technocrat coming in or somewhere else.
So I combined the the technical part of myself and the politics to be able to come out with a budget that relates to the people. I'm an MP. I interact with my constituents. I know the needs of the people. I feel the pain of the ordinary Ghanaian. Sitting and making a decision, economic policies to transform their lives, I know exactly what to do. And I appreciate that one city can make a life better for someone. And so getting the opportunity to allocate resources and to raise resources, I have to make sure that those allocations can change lives. And that's exactly what I've done today.
So today, you've done what was for us one of the key things that we looked at and tore apart when you made all the promises in your budget. You cut taxes. In fact, you cut more taxes than you promised, as we've established tonight.
All right.
You're also spending quite a bit on social interventions all across the board. And at the same time, you've managed to find holes in there that you're plugging with stuff like the tax refund account savings that you found in there that you're using. On Twitter, I've seen a trend there, autonomics, that has popped up since the whole of this morning. How do you feel? Because in history, we see a lot of that sort of tagging. We have Abenomics. People are now talking about Trumponomics because of his penchant to impose tariffs on. That for him is his economic style and concept and policy. This organically emerged. Learning that already people are seeing through your sort of what is defining your approach to doing economics and being finance minister. I wonder how that plays up with you, even if you even noticed it.
I've not honestly noticed it because I've been quite busy yesterday and today putting together this document for the consumption of the public. But I feel good. I feel good in the sense that I've been in office for just 5 weeks. But so far, I think we've made some considerable progress to reverse the mess we inherited. So far, we've been able to present a budget that has been widely accepted by the people. My work now is to go and implement it, to make sure I implement that budget well. Aside, we have huge problems awaiting us, being inheritance. But we inherited it. And I said today to Parliament that, yes, we have inherited a terrible economy, a very troubling one. But I call on everyone to join us to fix it so that we can make Ghana a better place for all of us. But I also commit in supporting the president to deliver his mandate in fixing this economy. That I will do. And that I will not renege on it. I will do whatever I have to do to support His Excellency, President Mahama, to succeed in ensuring that we reverse the decline of the Ghanaian economy. That we will do.
Dr. Ato Forson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before that you join me. And that there is the Finance Minister, Dr. Ato Forson. He is going to Parliament tomorrow. He's hoping to get the tax handles considered and approved under a certificate of urgency. We'll be there, bring you live coverage of that tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening.